Hello to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone joining us, and welcome to our conversation with the recipients of the 2020 Ashesi Scholarship, Leadership and Citizenship Award, which is also known as the President's Award. The video you've just watched is of a local chief in Veracruz, Nana Oteng Koranche II, and his attendants, who have always been great supporters of Ashesi and who, though the ceremony was virtual, were still able to join us in the celebration. Welcome to our founder and president, Patrick Ewia, to our university and foundation board members, and to you, our distinguished guests. This award is the highest a student can receive at Ashesi, and the recipients are always incredibly inspiring. We're so excited to be able to share this piece of the graduation experience with you and to celebrate with you these students' achievements. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedules to be with us. Some of you may have noticed we're speaking today to the award recipients from the class of 2020 and not the class of 2021. The class of 2020 did indeed complete their studies at Ashesi in May of 2020, but they had asked to hold off the graduation ceremony in the hopes that COVID will have passed and that they could have their celebration in person with their families and friends in physical attendance. Unfortunately, a year in, and we're still, for the most part, unable to convene physically. The class had their ceremony online in the middle of May, followed by the 2021 class graduation a couple of weeks later. So this is a brief session. We'll begin with the Ashesi University Dean of Students, Abdul Mahdi, who will briefly explain what this award signifies, and then we'll go on to the conversation. We're honored to have with us, hosting the conversation, Ashesi University's founder and president, Patrick Ewia. I'll pass you on to the Dean in a moment, but before that, some housekeeping. There will be time, as you can see on the agenda, for questions after the initial interviews. And so as questions come to you as you're listening, please type them into the chat and one of my team members will note them. Please remember to mute your microphones throughout the session. And if you have any challenges or queries, you can send a direct message to either Kayla or to Megan in the chat. And now on to Dean Abdul.
The Scholarship, Leadership and Citizenship Award is given to graduates who have lived out Ashesi's core values during their time at the university. These awardees have contributed in outstanding ways to Ashesi's mission and have had a strong impact on the Ashesi community. This is the highest award a student can receive at Ashesi and is presented by the president of the university.
All right. Now we'll move on to Patrick to begin with the conversation.
Hello, welcome once again, and thank you all for joining us. I am Patrick Ewia. I'm the founder and president of Ashesi University in Ghana. And I want to thank you all for making the time to celebrate Gumiso, Zoe, and Major with us. We have a lot of pride in their achievements. And what I would like to do this afternoon, this morning, is to just have an informal conversation with the three of them and invite you to join us in this conversation. So I'd like to keep this quite informal. When I returned to Ghana 20 years ago to establish Ashesi University, one of the things that I really hoped that we would accomplish was that we would empower young Africans to take on the challenges of this continent and to show tenacity, to show strong ethics and an entrepreneurial spirit. And this award is our way of recognizing those students who have most embodied during their time at Ashesi the core values of our institution. And so it is no small feat to be selected. And I'd like to congratulate all of you, Gumiso, Zoe, and Major, again, for winning this award for your class. I'll start with Gumiso. When Gumiso was at Ashesi, he was very involved with the local community and most notably helped to develop a design thinking class for junior high school students in the local village of Brekuso. beyond accomplishments on campus and in the local community, also worked on research and analysis of the legal and regulatory regime in Ghana, and how STEM education can be effectively delivered in schools across the country. As a passionate advocate for women's issues, she also spent 3 months in 2017 on deep policy lobbying and advocacy with a major women's rights organization in Ghana. And then in 2020, just before she embarked on her master's program at Sciences Po in Paris, she worked with a leadership institute to deliver leadership lessons for their 2020 cohort of leaders. So Gumiso, I'd like to start right off the bat. How did it feel when you heard your name called as one of the recipients of the Scholarship Leadership Citizenship Award? And what does it mean to you to be recognized in this way?
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Patrick. I must say I was really overjoyed when I heard the announcement and my name throughout. And for me, it was that sort of reassurance that indeed you're good. Even though nobody sees your work, sometimes you might be doing good, somebody will recognize it at the end. So I was really overjoyed, and it gave me that confidence to continue doing what I'm meant to do. Thank you.
All right, now let me introduce Zoe Tagbato. Zoe is a very energetic member of the Ashesi community. As an alum, she's still very much a member of the community. And she pursued competence in multiple programming languages beyond the academic requirements at Ashesi. And her programming success included designing an application to enhance hearing for individuals who are hard of hearing using digital signal processing. And she also developed the first mobile application to teach Ghanaian Sign Language in the country. She interned both in Ghana and Canada, was accepted into the Google Women Techmaker Scholars Program, and also honored as a Melton Fellow. It's good to see you, Zoe. Now that you're a year out of Ashesi, what are you up to?
Thank you for the question. So out of Ashesi, I was lucky enough to get a role at Goldman Sachs, which is where I'm working now. I am trying to continue my work with accessibility here as well. So I've joined an accessibility group trying to make the web and the products we create more accessible for clients and more accessible for developers as well to have experiences here. What
has driven your interest in accessibility? Okay. And you've put a lot of energy behind this, and it's great to see that kind of passion. Can you tell us a little bit about what drives that?
Okay, sure. So initially, in my high school, we were lucky enough to take a British Sign Language course. So that was the first peak of my interest in sign language. And then when we moved to Canada, my little sister was diagnosed as being hard of hearing. And I realized there were stumbling blocks that she had that I didn't realize were there in the world. And so I wanted to kind of level the playing field by creating something that would make things easier for her. And in turn, I discovered things that were harder for other people. And I wanted to level the playing field there as well.
All right. And now let me introduce our third awardee, Major Kadonso. Major excelled both academically and socially, and he graduated with almost a perfect GPA in Ashesi's rigorous engineering program. So no mean achievement. He was one of the early and most active volunteers for the Bounty Initiative, which is aimed at empowering young women in Brekusu. And he and others in the Bounty team established the Brekusu Community Library to promote reading in the community, especially among girls. And when Ashesi launched its partnership with Arizona State University in this 3+1+1 program, Major was one of the first cohort of students in this accelerated master's program for high-performing students. Major, what have you been up to in the year since you left Ashesi, when you finished your Ashesi coursework?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So like I finished my Ashesi coursework, I think that's like 2 years ago. That was when I was in my junior year. Then I moved straight into ASU to pursue like my graduate studies. So for the past 2 years, I've been working on a master's in electrical engineering with a focus on power engineering. And I was very fortunate to also get an opportunity to do like an extra certificate in nuclear studies and radiology studies. So that's what I've been working on for the past 2 years, ever since I left Ashesi.
Okay, so I'd like to perhaps give each of you a chance to give us some insight in your leadership journeys, and I'll ask maybe one or two questions, and you can answer them in whatever order you prefer. First, what is your understanding of what it means to be a leader, or what it was like being a leader at Ashesi while you were a student? And also what you see your role as leaders moving forward. Gumiso, I have a very specific question for you. You graduated in the top 5% of your class, and you were involved in a lot of service programs on campus, including providing psychosocial support to children and youth with different circumstances. As you look to the future, how will you build on this work and what you're hoping to explore in your career? And a Major, you were also involved in many community initiatives on campus. I wanted you to share a little bit about the Melton Fellowship, what it meant for you, and also looking forward 10 years into the future, what are the problems that you're hoping to solve? So just 3 questions, and you can answer it in whatever order you prefer. I want to keep this quite informal.
Okay, I can start. I will talk about your question about what I'm hoping to explore in my career and what leadership means. I think when you're at Ashesi, if you're not careful, you might get lost in this narrative of people achieving quite a lot, because on a daily you hear that somebody did this, they got an award here, an international recognition. And so it became important for me to really ground myself in what I thought was my mandate. And that's how I was able to go on this leadership journey. And so I wasn't looking at the recognition that would come, but I was looking more at what kind of impact I would make. And that's why I engaged in various activities. And so from now on, I'm hoping really, I'm hoping to establish a leadership initiative, especially for the young women. And I believe that is where my mandate lies, or the fields that my mandate is supposed to go in. And so that's what I'm looking to, because I think there are a lot of problems that we might face, that we're facing at Ashesi, that we sort of need to ground now. I've learned a lot at Ashesi, and it's time for me, I guess, to apply it. And I guess there's a lot more that I'm learning even now in my master's degree. And so I'm hoping to establish more of this leadership outside the Ashesi arena and more into other communities that I might be involved in.
Major, do you want to go next?
Sure.
And then we'll go to Zoe.
Okay, yeah. I think I'll start with what leadership meant to me, like when I was at Ashesi, and then move into the question that is specific, that you specified for me. So prior to Ashesi, I was very fortunate to be like one of those people who got like leadership, the opportunity to be in leadership roles throughout my like primary, secondary education. And when I came to Ashesi, I actually made a very conscious decision to try and go against actually what Ashesi was preaching, like you should be and like go forth and be a leader. I was trying to learn followership actually. I told myself that I didn't want to be that kind of person that I'd always been, like the person who gets to be at the forefront most of the times. I wanted to learn, like to be a follower. Like that's what I pushed myself like more towards. But in that space again, there are other things that I subscribe to. I was trying to shape my views and my world views and try to ground myself in a sense, because I was in that journey. I realized that I couldn't run away from leadership. I could run away from making the decision to be the person at the forefront, but I still had some kind of leadership that I kind of partook in, but in this sense, in a different nature, on a different style, in the sense that it was more about influence and impact and kind of relevance. And it's a very like sweet spot that I feel very comfortable in now, right now, that I don't want to be that person at the forefront, but I want to be that person who has influence and can make impact and be relevant in my community. So yeah, that's my leadership style right now. That's what I'm trying to kind of hone my skills around that. What do I want to do like in the next 10 years or so? So during my stay, I was working on most of my time I spent it in the space of education, especially uh, like educating girls in communities like Berikusu and some other communities in Ghana, even across the world through the Melton Foundation. Uh, this is something that comes from like a deep place in my heart, because my mother had me when she was 16, and she was very bright in school, and she had to drop out. And um, it's only after I finished my A level that she had the opportunity to continue with her studies. And I was like very fortunate to be one of her teachers in that time period as well. And from that process, I got like some very like uh, like like some high level satisfaction from that the idea that I taught my mom, and it's something that I wanted to carry forward and share with other people, other girls across the world. So I think I'll continue my work in that space to try and bring more access to education, especially to girls and other people in places that don't have access to education. And I'm also into power and power engineering. I realize that power is something that is vital in development, especially in Africa. So I'm also in that space where I'm trying to get to gain the expertise that is needed to try and come and build and modernize the grid in Africa. So yeah, I think in the next 10 years I'll be working on these problems.
Okay, Zoe?
So prior to Ashesi, I think I was quite different from Major. I was more of a follower. I think I was the second born in my family, so I was used to following my older sister because I think she's a very competent, natural leader. And I think Ashesi challenged my ideas on what leadership actually is, because I kept getting thrust into leadership positions. And initially I was very frustrated with that, because I was like, I'm not the type of person who can be a leader. And I think it challenged me to think, okay, I can make leadership my own. You don't have to act like people you've seen before, but you develop what style of leadership you want to do, and it can be developed by your passion. So I was passionate about accessibility, and from that I got to lead projects on that, and I was able to see how different people work and what they're passionate about, and kind of putting them in spaces that they're passionate about really made me enjoy leading and want to lead more now.
Okay. So I have a follow-up question for all of you, and I think you've touched on an aspect of leadership that I have struggled with a little bit. So this idea of the one hero that solves the problems, right? And it is sometimes overwhelming. You know, you achieve some success. In my case with Ashesi, a question that I kept getting asked all the time was, how are you going to scale it to solve all of Africa's education problems, right? Be a multi-campus university and so on and so forth. And there's just sort of this very strong it's almost like a desire by society to have that one hero that's off, fixing things. And, I settled on, look, I don't need to be the hero, and Ashesi doesn't need to be the one organization solving the problem. We can work collaboratively with other universities. I'm just wondering, how are you guys navigating that question and that pressure, if you will, that comes from all around us? And oh, by the way, does this award actually add to that pressure? So we'll start this time let's start with Zoe this time. Just be, I'm just really curious how you guys are navigating this, right, as young people.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's funny you speak about the award because it came at a time I'd only started my job for, I think I'd been here for a week and a half or 2 weeks. I think it was 2 weeks. And my team found out about the award. So, when you come into a new place and school and work are very different, you feel like they have higher expectations of you. So in a sense, it was like, oh no, I don't know what I'm doing yet, but I will get there. But as to being like the one leader, I think it's a question that you definitely struggle with because people think, okay, you can do it all. But something that I am passionate about as well is mentorship, because I realized that if you are the only person and you don't leave a legacy, everything will die with you, if you don't have energy for it. And you can't have energy for something forever. And I realized that people who have inspired me are people like Derek Omari, who also worked with accessibility. And funnily enough, he's in London now, and I get to connect with him and talk to him and discuss with him the plans I want to do and how I can collaborate with him. And then I'm also trying to mentor some of the incoming interns from Ashesi who started in Goldman Sachs this week. To try and encourage them to see the things they can do here and how they can improve, because I think that's the only way that we will move forward. If we help people behind us and get inspired by people in front of us, I think it's a very collaborative process.
Okay. Major, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the pressure is real, right? With the award and some of maybe the things that one might have achieved along the way, people might look at you in a certain way to maybe sort for almost all kinds of solutions from you, and that's not entirely feasible. That's totally not feasible. And I think I appreciate it in the same way that Zoe does. Like, for me, I kind of based on a fundamentals level, I define success to me means nothing when you cannot replicate it in other people, and that is something that I've always kind of held dearly to was one of my principles. So I think the only way, the realization that you can't solve every problem is there, and the only way maybe you can try to amplify your impact or like your influence and relevance is through what Zoe is trying to, I think, explain, like mentorship. And maybe sometimes you inspire people that you don't even know, and that in that way, like, you propagate that zeal and the fire that people need to kind of go and solve other problems. We can mentor people who are passionate about other things, and they go in their own directions, on their own trajectories. But that's how we multiply impact, and that's how I think we can kind of try to solve more problems, not all problems.
Okay. I don't know if Gumiso is still on the call. I don't see her. But let me just say that you guys are really ahead of me. When I finished college, I wasn't really thinking in this way at all. And it's really, I think for me, it's gratifying to see that you're grappling with this. You've accomplished so much already, and you're being quite thoughtful about how you move forward. It took me a while to think about mentorship and delegating things to people and collaboration. So it's great that you're already on that path. Now, we have quite a few people who've joined us this morning and this afternoon, depending on where they're calling from. And I just thought I'd just get the ball rolling, but really have time to address the questions of people who are on this call with us. And Megan, I know that some people sent questions to you ahead of time. Perhaps we could start with those and then open up for others to ask questions on this live call.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, Zoe and Major and Gumiso. We are trying to get Gumiso back on, so hopefully she'll pop up. I'm Megan Hastings. I'm one of the Director of Strategic Partnerships at the Foundation, and it was my colleague Nachula who launched the event. I think she forgot to say
neglected to say her name.
Yeah. So we are part of the global team that works on behalf of these amazing alumni and students. So we did receive some questions in advance, but one that came in to me privately via chat already, I thought we'd start with is, Zoe and Major, you are out in the world right now, both for work and for graduate studies. What are your long-term plans in terms of how you may or may not return to the continent or invest in the continent long-term? And that's a big part of Ashesi's mission. Would love to hear from you. When do you want to start, Zoe?
Yeah, I think that was a major question for me because initially I came to Ashesi to experience Ghana and then go back because I didn't grow up in Ghana, but I did want to connect to my roots. But after coming here and seeing some of the issues here and wanting to reconnect there, I definitely do want to come back. And I think I'm trying not to kill my ties with the school I worked at, the deaf school I worked at in Ghana. And so I think my aim is to try and volunteer for organizations like that here while working and hopefully developing the funds and see how we can develop look at some of their solutions and see if some of them can be applied to the Ghanaian context. And if not, what can we do to improve what's there already?
For me, when I came to Ashesi, I came on a MasterCard scholarship, and one of MasterCard is big on give back and our work, like scholars work on the continent. And for me, currently, I'm in the US, but my long-term plan is to go back home because when I chose to go into power engineering, it was very intentional because power is like a big problem in Africa, and it's I think for the longest time a lot of people have been trying to solve that problem, and I would really love to join to be part of those people who are fighting that fight in Africa to try and make energy more accessible and more affordable. Right now, I would say I'm trying to gain the expertise that I can kind of bring back home, because I would like to. I think my time at Ashesi kind of taught me one thing, about solving these big continental problems. I think the engineering expertise is necessary, but you need to have the business know-how, I think, because you need to run businesses and make money and make it sustainable. You also need to understand how the policy around those things kind of work. So I want to prepare myself by putting myself in the nexus of all these three fields, the engineering space, the business space, as well as the policy making space, before I can come and be part of the team that is trying to solve this problem. I think there is a lot of opportunity in that space. And my long-term plan is to come and try to establish something in Africa in the power space.
Fantastic. Thanks, Major. And Gumiso, I think you are back on. We were asking, since you're currently in a graduate program abroad, what are your long-term plans for returning or working on the continent?
Thank you. Sorry about my connection issue. For the long term, I'm still working to establish a structure for leadership, like I mentioned earlier, in Zimbabwe. It's a bit difficult for me now to really tell when I'll be back, but I have a lot of plans about establishing.
Oh, we lost you a little bit, Gamiso. Why don't I move on to the next question, and hopefully we'll come back to Gamiso. There was a question from Kofi Tuya submitted in advance asking what was the most important character value that Ashesi instilled in you? And we can go back to Zoe. And you guys, alumni, why don't you keep your microphone off mute so we can move quickly.
Sure. I'm not sure if it's a character value per se, but I would say confidence is one of the things that I think I got from Ashesi, because I think often you don't realize how much you can do till you're doing it. I remember even when they were reading the award, some of the stuff I don't really remember necessarily doing this, or sometimes you do things just because you like them or you enjoy doing them, and then you realize, oh, okay, it's something to be awarded for. So I think it's just given me confidence that I can do if I'm challenged to do, because I did it in Ashesi with all the academic rigor and all the stress of going on and off campus and leading and coordinating. So I can do it even in Goldman Sachs or wherever life takes me next.
Fantastic. How about you, Major?
I think I would say something like, I think Ashesi told me how to capitalize on meaningful collaborations, because in Ashesi, the intimate kind of nature of the environment, and you get to interact with people like Zoe, Gumiso, and many other like very brilliant and wonderful students, and get to work on different projects and even academic work with them. That was like something that I kind of value very much, even up to now. Like the power, it made me realize the power of meaningful collaboration. So something that I value like the most.
Fantastic. I'm going to pivot to a question from the chat from Tom Holscher. What advice would you give to students or others who really want to make an impact in their community, but who have zero experience and don't know where to start? Why don't we start with you, Major? And Gumiso is still working on connectivity, so hopefully we'll get her back.
Mm-hmm. I think I would say, I think impact kind of exists at the intersection of your passion and your energy and your focus, I guess. There is, I don't believe that there is like like a like a formula to say this is what you're supposed to do to kind of create impact. But if one can find what like can learn so much about themselves to realize what they are passionate about, and then be able to channel some of their energy or most of their energy towards that one thing, most probably they are going to create impact. So I would say that.
I definitely agree with Major, but something else I'll add is curiosity. Part of the reason I even learned British Sign Language before I heard about my sister was because in my school, we had, in one of my high schools, we had an event where every Wednesday you had to do something outside of school. So I learned stuff like floristry or carpentry, etc. Like I think we even learned how to do hair. And then I got to sign language and I thought it was beautiful. And then after that, it kind of stuck with me. So if you don't know where to start doing something. Just check out what you're curious about. Even if you're not curious about it, if you've never heard about it, go and learn something about it. If you do, eventually it'll lead you to something you're passionate about, and then you'll be able to make an impact.
Fantastic. It sounds like Gumiso is back on. I'm going to launch another question at you, Gumiso. How do you think Ashesi's emphasis on ethical thinking and leadership can be applied by you and your work and other graduates in the future? And is there anything specific about your training at Ashesi around the ethical thinking and leadership that you can think of a specific situation at Ashesi that you can reference back? This is a question from Jan Birnbaum.
Okay, thank you. I have to start by saying that with regards to ethical leadership, with regards to the education that we received, one thing I noted was that you had to own the idea of integrity, not only the idea of it, but the practice of it, living it every day. And that if you don't have that at your core, it becomes difficult to say, I went through an education that's focused on ethical thinking and I'm actually applying it in my life. So I believe that it's important that this same focus of ethical thinking be taken to other schools. I wish other schools and people in general would own it on a personal note. And I'm not sure how it would help other graduates just from me giving my own suggestions, but it starts from you cultivating it. It starts from you being put in situations where you have to use it. I remember at Ashesi, we had one course, giving voice to values, and we would be given different scenarios of what you would do. And you would see that most of the times you would focus on giving what you think would be the most ideal or sounds great or something that would benefit you. And so that became different in that if you owned it, I decided to own that same vision and it worked for me. And for other people, it's really about encouraging them. And I wish we had a course on that, or Ashesi could give that course, not necessarily to its students, but as another course that they just offer to the public. If people want to take it, they go through it, because it's difficult for people to just own it just by telling them right off that you need to be ethical.
Mm-hmm. Major, Zoe, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Gamisa said it really excellently. You really have to be intentional about what you do in everything. So yeah, I really think owning it is the way to go. I don't think there's anything much to add to what she said.
I think you sort of touched on it, Gamisa, but we also had a question for secondary students that would like to come to Ashesi. What advice would you give them to make the most of their time at Ashesi or to be successful as an Ashesi student?
Okay, I would tell them that it all matters. Everything matters. So this starts right before you come into Ashesi. It's about how you prioritize, how you use your time. Do you have any goals that you've set for yourself? That's before. And when you come into Ashesi, I know that there's this emphasis that you need to be involved, you need to do extracurricular activities, but don't also forget that you are there primarily to get something out of it, which is usually the academic qualification. That is also important. It is also important to do other things whilst you're an Ashesi. And one key thing is, don't just, for high school students or anyone else, you are not supposed to just get into things because people are doing it. Let me just focus on this project because everyone is doing it, or there are scholarships that come out of it. But it's important to find that one thing or a few things that you like and pursue it. And at Ashesi, there are many, many opportunities, many things that you can do. And some of the things, you don't have to see them there, you can create it. And that's the power of being at Ashesi. So it's important that you take note that everything matters. No part of you, no part of your work, no part of your values is trivial. Everything matters.
That's so powerful. Major, I had the chance to ask you this when we met a couple months ago in Arizona, but what's something that stood out to you when joining other graduates from other universities as a master's student? What was something that stood out to you about Ashesi or your experience there that you felt, prepared you or was in contrast to maybe some of your colleagues?
I think throughout my 2 years stay, so I mean, I think I had like an upper hand when it comes to, I think this is because of the liberal arts education and the kind of training and learning environment that you get at Ashesi. Uh, the idea of like something that I've stated already, like meaningful collaborations and being like a good communicator as well. Something that I found to be very useful throughout my stay, and it kind of put me like above like some of the people that I was in my taking classes with, because I could explain my ideas quite clearly, and most of the times that led to good relationships with some of my professors, and they would become quite like more interested in learning more about me, and saying, okay, we want you, can you come and explain this idea. One of my professors, for example, he was working on a project with like a big power company, and he just threw some of the work in my direction to say, okay, I want you to express this in your own like way. He knows the thing, but he just wants me to put it in my own like understanding. And yeah, I mean, that was like a good thing, like the preparation, communication, and yeah, I think that was like top notch. It's something that I found very useful.
Fantastic. It looks like we have a question from Mohit in the chat. Would you like to unmute, Mohit, and ask live? Put you on the spot. Let's see. Oh, he's unable to speak. Okay, I'm going to read it for him then. So Mohit is asking, how do you deal with failure, and what role has failure played in your success thus far?
Okay, I can go ahead. I just had a failure this week, and that's why I jumped in to speak. It's been very difficult for me to deal with failure since growing up, because when you're used to be the face of everything, you've done well, you've done good, everyone does expect a lot from you, and when it hits, it's difficult to deal with. So I couldn't deal with it in the first days, but when I came to Ashesi, I realized that everyone is good. And so realizing that everyone is good, it's important to take advantage of them. So when I experience or go through a situation that I would call a failure, I take time off, even thinking about it. And recently, like I was saying, there was a project I had applied for funding and I didn't get in. And so I just took time to get off, not think about the project, not think about what I'm doing, but I'll come back to it a few days later because it bugs you throughout the week. You come back to it and you say, how do I re-strategize? And I think it's also the environment at Ashesi that has taught me that you can always bounce back from your failure. So it's not your ultimate failure. There are a lot more things to look forward to tomorrow. So I take time off and then come back later on. That's how I deal with it.
Fantastic. Zoe or Major, anything to add?
Yeah, I think for me, funny enough, my entry into Ashesi, I think, started with my greatest failure. So before Ashesi, I was doing pre-med. I decided to opt out of that, and my grades were bad. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to come to Ashesi, new start. I'm just going to try and get through. And I think that's where my greatest successes came from, because I'd seen how low I could go. And then I had support. I had support from my friends. I had support from my family. And in Ashesi, there was so much support there that no matter whether I failed or not, there were students, even when I was walking by, I'd be like, how are you doing with the assignment? And people would be like, oh, I'm failing. And then I felt, okay, I'm not alone. And then I could wake up and go there and do it. So I feel like one of the most important things is discussing our failures, which I think being an award recipient has kind of made me want to do even more with the people who came below me, because some of them are like, Zoe, but how did you do it? I'm like, in second year myself, I took too much. I failed by taking too many classes, and I keep failing. And I feel like if you keep failing and keep discussing with everybody else around you, then it's easier for you to recover from failure. Because like Dumisa, when I was in high school, it's very difficult for me to live with failure, because I thought, how can I fail? This is the end, it's all over. But when you hear more about it and you realize that, okay, my parents failed, um, my siblings failed, everyone around me is failing, you feel like, okay, it's not just me, I can do it. And then it boosts you up.
Fantastic. Sounds like an adjustment to the terminology might be needed, that failure really is a misnomer because it's part of the learning journey. Major, did you have something you wanted to say?
I just wanted to agree with both Gumiso and Zoe. I mean, just like success, I mean, um, you need to, I believe that to a certain extent, you need to succeed a number of times for you to be able to handle success quite well. And in the same sense, again, you need to fail a number of times to be able to handle failure like quite like in a good way. I mean, yeah, discussing it and sharing it with friends and realizing that you're not the only one. It happens to the best of us, and yeah, I think that's the best way to deal with failure.
Yeah, thank you. Reggie submitted a question in advance, and I'm going to ask him to unmute and ask directly. And then we'll go to Almaz's question.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Reggie Brown. I'm the incoming board chair for the Ashesi Foundation. I'm excited about taking on that role. But my question, first of all, I want to just commend you all on the tremendous stature that you've already achieved. And many of us who have been lucky enough to achieve leadership roles in our lives are looking at you and wishing we had that sort of capability and depth at the age that you have. But having said that, when much is possible, much is asked. So I'd like to ask each of you to maybe say what you think are the biggest challenges facing the continent over the next 20 years, and whether any of you may see yourselves down the road in roles that can particularly address those challenges.
Sure. I think I can start, right? Um, this might be, maybe I might be a bit biased because I'm looking at the world from like and like from an engineering kind of point of view, and what my passion drives me towards. So I think I've kind of touched on this a little bit, but there's for me, I think the idea of power and energy is something that might kind of be a problem on the continent in the next couple of years, maybe 20 years, 2 decades or something like that. Because, and I feel like it's a pressing issue, because energy kind of drives almost everything else on the continent, be it agriculture, food production, that's food security, be it climate, trying to address climate change, be it health, and all these other issues. And I, right now, I think it's less than 56% of the continent has access like to clean and affordable energy, and that's a big gap that we need to fill. In other countries that like Zimbabwe, South Sudan, the situation is even quite quite dire, and it's something that we need to address as soon as possible. And now it's a very tricky space that we find ourselves, because right now when we try to expand in the power space using traditional means, like let's say in Zimbabwe there is coal, right? If we say we want to build a coal power plant, it's now going against sustainability and climate change. So we find ourselves in this space in a corner where we have to develop, but at the same time do that in the most sustainable way. I mean, it's very feasible and it's very possible, but it's something that we need to. I think we need a lot of expertise in that area, and try to address that issue like all hands on deck in that space, because once we clear the energy question, I think we can be able to kind of deal with other issues in the best way possible.
Okay, I have two. The first one, technological advancement. I believe that in as much as there's been a lot of development, a bit more of innovation, we've changed a few things, but I believe that we are still lagging behind in terms of technological advancement, technology that we could be using in education, technology that we could be using for accessibility. And recently I was watching a video where I'm not sure if it's China, but there was a building that was done in about 28 hours, and it's structurally sound, built from different components. And that's also because of the advancement in technology. And I wish that there would be more investment in that on the continent. And the second one, and the big one for me, I think there's a lot of corruption and poor leadership. And I believe that Ashesi is contributing to alleviate problems that come with corruption and poor leadership, but it also needs to be extended to other institutions and even our government institutions, for example. And sometimes this is one of the issues that drives away young people, for example, in my country, to other nations. I saw a question in the chat that was saying something along those lines. How can we keep leaders? It's very difficult to work or function in an environment where whenever you're trying to progress, there's a lot of corruption and poor leadership. And I'm sure it's faced in a lot of countries. But I believe that if we have the Ashesi model, for example, in other institutions across the continent, then that would really help so much.
And I'd like to kind of echo Gamiso's point, where I think education is really one of the things we really need to tackle, especially critical thinking and something like the Ashesi model, because there are good schools like Ashesi, but there are also disparities in education. And I can speak of this, I guess, from an accessibility standpoint, where I was teaching in Mampong School for the Deaf, and I realized that the children there were learning how to use Windows 7. And even when I tried to teach them how to use the new Windows, they weren't able to. And given that there are technological advancements that could help people, if they don't learn about it, how are they supposed to use it? So I feel like it starts from the ground level. If we teach people how to critically think about how to solve their problems practically, and not just from the university level, but from the primary school level, I think we can create more change. And if we can borrow the ethical teaching model that Ashesi has as well, hopefully we could try and get rid of corruption as it comes out, because it's a problem that I think we face a lot and something that really needs to be tackled, because it sends people away from wanting to work in government institutions, because you feel as though you're fighting against yourself. And some people go in there and then they have to leave. And some people go there and then they change with the system. And we want to create change in that system rather than making people more corrupt because they feel like they're fighting a losing battle.
Yeah. Fantastic. I think we sort of covered Almaz's question. This conversation could go on much longer. I want to ask one last brief question of each of you, and then encourage everyone who is here to reach out if you have questions. Ashesi's Education Collaborative is certainly addressing some of these last points that we talked about, and is a big piece of addressing those institutional challenges across the continent. So we'd love to share that with you. But to each of you, again, this was a previously submitted question. If you had a magic wand and resources were unlimited, what would you grant to either individual students or Ashesi as a whole to take Ashesi's impact that much further? What would be useful, what would be needed that could be transformative for students or the university as a whole? What's your dream scenario? What's the next school Ashesi would have, degree, or did you see individual students that there were still resources needed? This is a question from Jan Berenbaum.
I would say that maybe in addition to the schools that Ashesi will add later on and the masters, I think it's important also to establish some political science or international relations division at Ashesi sometime. I think it's also a great platform to train the leaders that most of the times go into politics, most of the times go into governance and diplomacy. It's really key, but it's not for tomorrow. It's obviously over the long term. Yes.
Got it. Zoe or Major, anything to add?
I think for me, I kind of look at it at a health perspective. We have great doctors in Ghana as well. But I think if that was a thing, I think starting a medical school would also be a really good thing to have, because while they are doctors, sometimes they're not all necessarily the most ethical, or they won't tell patients what they need to know, so they can take charge of their own illnesses. And I suppose that's probably because my family's in the healthcare profession, and you see people who have like end-stage kidney disease, etc., because people don't take the time to explain to them what's wrong with them, how they can deal with it. And I guess there are also people who can't afford the medical care that we need. So if we can create something there and maybe put technology to it as well, maybe we can create a better healthcare system as well.
I think I would approach it from a different angle. I've been very fortunate. Last year around October or so, I got nominated to be part of the 10 finalists for the Rhodes Scholarship, and I got to meet some brilliant minds from all over Zimbabwe, across Zimbabwe, and we got some time to discuss some of these issues, some of the pressing issues on the continent. And what I got from that interaction is that it's not only Ashesi that is trying or has reached that point of realization that the continent needs a turnaround in terms of leadership and the way we approach leadership and ethics. So I think Ashesi should try and expand its connections on the continent as well. I don't know how that can be achieved. Maybe exchange programs with students from schools on the continent. Yeah, maybe give them an opportunity to spend some time on campus. Maybe summer programs. There are students out there in the traditional schools who are very keen to look at these problems and share ideas and learn on how best and collaborate to try and tackle these same problems that we're trying to solve. So I think, yeah, we need to look, I don't know if you can say inwardly or maybe on the continent, and try to extend our reach and try to extend our connections on the continent. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you all. I'm going to pass it back to Nachula to close the event.
There we go. Thank you, Megan. And we're right at the top of the hour. Thank you to everybody who's participated. Thank you to Zoe, Major, Homiso. All of the comments just, they hit home for me. I was glad to hear, Major, when you talked about power and energy and how it powers everything. And so it's a no-brainer that there should be something done in this sector for the continent that makes it sustainable and that makes it accessible, right? And so, yeah, so just all of it just very, just touches home. Thank you all for your time. Thank you, Patrick, for taking the time to lead us through this conversation. For everybody, we will be reaching out for sure to everybody. Please expect to hear from us. If you want to participate, to be part of our work at Ashesi, I think that on the screen now, I can't see it as yet. You'll see our website. Please go ahead and visit our website. There it is. Or email us, and you can be part of what we're doing at Ashesi.
Thank you, everyone, and congratulations to Zoe, Major, and Gumiso. We're really proud of you.